The night the little boy said those words, the sky over the small frontier town didn't feel like a sky at all. It felt like a lid, pressed low and heavy over the land, trapping every breath, every secret, every quiet cry no one wanted to hear. The saloon lanterns glowed soft and dusty, spilling light onto the street where men drifted like tired shadows. Horses snorted at the posts. A dog barked in the distance, then went silent. Inside the saloon, the piano had gone quiet. Voices dropped low as a tall cowboy stepped through the swinging doors. His name was Eli Ward, though most folks just called him Eli or Ward when they wanted something, and that big cowboy when they didn't. He wasn't the loudest man in town or the quickest to laugh, but people made room when he walked by. There was a kind of weight in his silence, the kind that came from years of doing his own work, minding his own business, and stepping between trouble and the weak when no one else would. Eli had dust on his boots, trail wind still in his coat, and a tiredness in his eyes that came from miles of open land and not enough sleep. He headed toward the bar to order one drink and maybe a plate of stew before riding back out to his ranch for the night. He never planned to stay long. He never did. But that night, plans didn't matter. Because that night, just as he placed some coins on the counter, a small figure slipped into the saloon, quiet as a whisper but carrying a storm inside him. A boy, couldn't be more than 8 or 9. Hat too big, hanging over sandy hair. Shirt too thin for the cold. Bare feet dusty and cut. His eyes were huge and dark, and they searched the room in a way that made Eli's chest tighten. A mix of fear, determination, and something desperate beneath it all. The piano player stopped. A few men turned to stare. A kid didn't belong in a place like this. The barkeep frowned. "Hey son, this ain't no place for..." The boy didn't even blink. He walked straight past the staring men, past the tables, past the empty chair near the corner, heading right for Eli like he'd been looking for him and no one else. "Mister," the boy said, voice shaking but loud enough to hear. Eli turned slowly, surprised. "You talking to me, kid?" The boy swallowed hard. Up close, Eli could see the dirt smudged on his face, the tear tracks cutting clean lines through it, the way his lower lip trembled no matter how hard he tried to keep it still. "Sir," the child said again, his small hands balled into fists at his sides. "Please, take my mama." The saloon went silent. The barkeep froze. A card player at the nearest table put down his hand. Everyone watched. Eli felt the whole room tilt, like the floor shifted under his boots. He stared down at the boy. "Say that again?" The boy licked his lips, eyes shining with stubborn courage. "Please take my mama," he repeated. She don't belong with him. You look strong, like you don't scare easy. Please, take her away." Eli had seen a lot in his years. Men fighting over land, broken hearts, rustlers, storms that tore apart barns. But he had never had a child walk straight up to him and ask him to take his mother. His voice came out low and careful. "Who's your mama with now?" The boy's eyes flicked toward the door, then back up at Eli. "A bad man," he whispered. "Everybody knows it. Nobody stops him." Eli's jaw tightened. There were always bad men in the territories. Men who took what they wanted. Men who hit first and answered questions never. "What's your name, son?" Eli asked. "Tommy," the boy said quietly. "Tommy Lane." Eli nodded. "All right, Tommy Lane. Where's your mama now?" Tommy's breath hitched. "He's got her at the boarding house. In the back room. I heard her crying. He said if she tries to leave again, he'll..." He stopped, swallowing hard. His small shoulders shook. "He hits her. A lot." Eli's hand curled slowly into a fist on the bar. The barkeep cleared his throat. "Ward, that would be Jeb Crowley he's talking about." Eli didn't look away from the boy. "Figures," he muttered. Jeb Crowley was a ranch foreman who thought a gun and a salary made him king. He drank hard, gambled harder, and swung his fists hardest of all. People in town had heard the stories. A woman taken in, then seen later with bruises. A boy flinching when his stepfather walked by. Eli had heard enough whispers to form a picture. He just hadn't had a reason to walk into Crowley's life yet. Now he did. Why me? Eli asked the boy. Plenty of men in this town. Tommy shook his head fast. They're scared of him. Or they pretend they don't see anything. He blinked up at Eli, voice cracking. But you ain't scared. I seen you stop a man from hittin' his horse in the street. You stood in front of a drunk sheriff when he was yellin' at that old woman with the stall. You don't let people get hurt. Eli felt something sharp press into his ribs from the inside. A memory of his own mama. Once cornered by a man who thought no didn't apply to him. Eli had been too young then to help. Too small. Too afraid. But he remembered her eyes. And he remembered the promise he made himself the day she died. If he ever had the strength to stand between a bully and the helpless, he would. No matter what it cost him. Please, Tommy whispered, a tear finally escaping and rolling down his cheek. If you don't take my mama, he's gonna KLL her. Eli's voice went rough around the edges. You want me to take her where? Anywhere, the boy said. Away. Safe. I don't care. I'll do anything you ask. I'll work. I'll clean. Just don't let him hit her no more. Eli looked down at the boy's clenched fists. Then at Tommy's eyes. There was no lie in them. Just raw truth and fear and love. The room watched, the whole saloon holding its breath. Slowly, Eli pulled a coin from his pocket and set it on the counter for the drink he hadn't touched. Then he straightened up to his full height, his shoulders rolling back like a man about to walk into a storm. All right, Tommy Lane, Eli said. Take me to your mama. The boy's relief was so strong it almost knocked him over. He nodded quickly and turned toward the door, but Eli stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. One more thing, Eli said. Man puts his hands on a woman like that. He don't give up easy. You stay behind me. You don't step in front. No matter what you hear. You understand. Tommy nodded, eyes huge. Eli looked at the barkeep. If I don't come back for my horse, you know where to sell him. The barkeep's eyes softened. You'll come back, Ward. Eli didn't answer. He followed the boy out of the saloon and into the cold night air. The town's main street looked different now, somehow smaller. The boarding house at the far end had one oil lamp burning in the front window. Thin lace curtains doing nothing to hide the shadows moving inside. Tommy walked fast, clutching the edge of Eli's coat like it was a rope across rough water. He's drunk most nights, Tommy whispered. He hits harder when he's drunk. Eli's jaw clenched. Where's the owner of the boarding house? She's scared of him too, the boy said. He pays for 2 rooms. She doesn't ask questions anymore. They reached the porch. Eli could hear it now. A man's slurred voice, low and mean, and a softer voice trying to sound calm but shaking underneath. Then a sharp thud, a muffled gasp. Eli didn't wait. He pushed Tommy gently behind him, then stepped forward and knocked on the door hard enough to rattle it in its frame. The room inside went silent. After a moment, a woman's voice, small and wary, floated toward them. Who is it? Eli Ward, he said. Open up. There was a pause. Then the click of a lock. The door opened just a crack, and a pair of frightened eyes peeked out. Mrs. Harper, the boarding house owner, looked up at him with a face lined by years of worry. Mr. Ward, now's not a... Eli stepped in gently, moving her aside without force but with firm purpose. Evening, ma'am. The smell hit him first. Cheap whiskey, sweat, fear. The hall was dim, lit by a single lamp. Eli followed the sound of heavy breathing and shifting weight down the narrow hallway to a half-open door. Inside, Jeb Crowley loomed over a woman hunched on the edge of a bed. Her hair was messy, one eye swelling dark, a bruise blooming along her cheekbone. Her hands trembled in her lap. The woman, Tommy's mama, looked up as Eli appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were a soft hazel, wide with shock and confusion and shame all at once. She had a beauty that hardship had not completely stolen, but it was buried under pain. Crowley turned, face flushed with drink, eyes narrowing. What the Ward? This ain't your business. Eli's gaze dropped briefly to the woman's bruises. The grip marks along her arms. The split in her lip. Looks like it is now, he said quietly. Crowley laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. You here to preach, cowboy? Or you just drunk enough to think you can tell me how to handle what's mine? Eli walked into the room slowly, the floor creaking under his boots. She ain't yours, he said, voice low. No woman is. Crowley sneered. She came here on my money. She eats my food. She owes me. That makes her mine until I say otherwise. Eli's eyes flashed. Your boy seems to think different. Crowley's head snapped toward the doorway, where Tommy stood, small and shaking but refusing to leave. Told you to stay outside, Eli said softly. I'm not leaving my mama, Tommy whispered. Crowley roared, stepping toward the boy with a raised hand. You little rat. Eli moved faster. His big hand snapped out, catching Crowley's wrist midair. The room stilled. Crowley's face twisted. Let go. Eli's grip tightened. You raise your hand at that boy again, he said, his voice deadly quiet. And you and I are going to have a different kind of conversation. Crowley tried to yank his arm back, but Eli held him like he wasn't even trying. The woman on the bed watched with wide eyes, one hand covering her mouth, like she didn't dare believe what she was seeing. Eli released Crowley's wrist slowly, then stepped between him and Tommy. This ends tonight, Eli said. Crowley scoffed. You don't get to decide that. Ain't deciding, Eli replied. Just stating what's about to happen. Crowley's hand went to the gun at his hip. You think I won't shoot you in front of them? Eli's gaze dropped to the holster, then back to Crowley's face. You can try, he said, but you'll be dead before your bullet hits anything important. There was no brag in his voice, just fact. The kind of fact spoken by a man who knew his own hands, his own speed, his own willingness to do what had to be done. Crowley hesitated. The air in the room grew hot and thin. Tommy, Eli said without looking back, take your mama's hand. Tommy rushed to his mother's side, grabbing her fingers in both of his. Mama, please, he whispered. Come on, we can go. The woman's eyes filled with tears, but fear held her like chains. He'll find us, she whispered. He always does. Eli looked down at her bruises again, his heart squeezed. Ma'am, he said gently. I got a ranch 15 miles from here. Ain't nobody comes onto my land without my say-so. You and your boy come with me tonight. He won't touch you again. Her lips trembled. You don't even know us. I know enough, Eli said. I know your boy walked into a saloon full of men and begged a stranger to save you. And I know what kind of man hits a woman who can't fight back. Crowley snarled. She ain't going nowhere. He reached for the woman's arm. Eli stepped in, shoving him back with a force that made the floorboards groan. She decides, Eli said sharply. Not you. The woman, her name was Claire, though no one had said it yet in that room, looked from Crowley to Eli, then down at Tommy's hopeful face. Her whole body shook. If we go, she whispered, tears slipping free. He'll come after you. Eli's gaze softened. Let him try. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, like she was talking to some quiet voice inside her. Then she opened them, filled with something Eli hadn't seen before in her. A thin, fragile line of courage. She squeezed Tommy's hand. Okay, she said, voice cracking. We'll go. Tommy let out a breath that sounded like a sob and a laugh twisted together. Crowley barked a curse and lunged for her again. But this time Eli didn't just shove him. He grabbed Crowley by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the wall. The lamp rattled. The whole house seemed to shudder. You touch them again, Eli said, his voice so low it sounded almost like a growl. And I'll bury you myself. You understand me? Crowley spat, face red. They're nothing. Trash. You're gonna ruin your life for trash. Eli's eyes went cold. Careful, he murmured. You're talking about my people now. Crowley froze. Your? Eli held his stare. If they leave with me, they're mine to protect. That makes them my people. You come after them, you come after me. For a long moment nobody moved. Then Crowley's eyes flickered, and something like fear slid through them. Eli released him and stepped back. We're done here. Crowley straightened his shirt, breathing hard. "This ain't over, Ward," he snarled. Eli turned his back on him, putting a hand on Claire's shoulder, guiding her gently to her feet. "For them," Eli said. "It is." Claire winced as she stood, pain shooting through her ribs, but she straightened as best she could. Tommy slipped under her arm to help. Eli led them out of the room, down the hall, past Mrs. Harper's wide eyes, and into the cold night. Tommy looked up at the stars. "We're really leaving," he whispered. Claire clutched his hand, tears tracking down her bruised face. "Looks like it," she said softly. They stepped off the porch together. Eli glanced back only once, catching sight of Crowley in the doorway, watching them with a mix of rage and something else, a promise of trouble. Eli met his gaze and held it, unflinching. Then he turned away. He lifted Claire carefully onto his horse, settling her in the saddle as gently as his big hands allowed. "You all right up there?" he asked. She nodded, though her body screamed in protest. "Tommy can ride with you?" she asked. "He's light." Eli scooped the boy up and set him in front of her. Tommy gripped the horn, glancing back at his mother with a hopeful grin. Eli untied the reins and placed them in Claire's hands. "Hold on tight," he said. "I'll walk you out till we clear town." She looked down at him with eyes that held both gratitude and fear. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Eli adjusted the saddle strap, then met her gaze. "Because your boy asked me to," he said. "And because nobody ever did it for my mama." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just watched him, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. A mix of safety and disbelief. They moved slowly through the sleeping town. A few faces peeked out from behind curtains, watching the cowboy lead the bruised woman and her boy away from the man who had claimed them. No one stepped in. No one helped. But for once, someone was at least walking them out. When they reached the edge of town, Eli swung into his own saddle with easy strength. The moonlight carved his face in silver edges and soft shadows. He looked over at them. "You ready?" Claire took a shaky breath. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I can't stay." Eli nodded once. "That's enough." They rode into the dark, away from the town, away from Crowley, away from everything that had hurt them. The night wrapped around them, but for the first time in a long time, the darkness didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a road, a beginning. And as they rode toward Eli's isolated ranch, the little boy looked over his shoulder at the tall cowboy and whispered, "Thank you, sir." Eli just nodded, eyes on the horizon, his jaw set with quiet promise. He had seen her bruises. He had heard the boy's plea. And in that moment, something inside him had shifted. She wasn't just a stranger he'd rescued. She was now under his protection. And Eli Ward was not the kind of man who ever broke a promise like that. The sun crawled up slow over the prairie, turning the sky from black to deep purple to pale gold. By the time the first light reached Eli's ranch, the air was cold enough to sting lungs, and frost clung to the fence rails like sugar. Eli rode in first, reins loose in his hand, his eyes scanning the familiar land. Behind him, on the second horse, Claire held Tommy close in front of her, her arms wrapped around him not just to steady him, but like she was afraid he might vanish if she let go. Her ribs ached, her lip burned, a bruise on her cheek throbbed with every heartbeat. But beneath all that, under the pain and exhaustion, something else had begun to flicker, a thin, fragile thread of safety. Eli slowed as they reached the wide yard in front of the small, sturdy house. It sat low and solid against the open land, like a quiet promise. A barn stood a short distance away, flanked by corrals and a windmill that creaked softly in the wind. Beyond that, fields stretched as far as the eye could see, edged by distant hills. Claire had never seen so much space in her life. No neighbors within shouting distance. No saloon noise. No eyes watching from every window. It terrified her and calmed her at the same time. Eli dismounted first, swinging down with the easy strength of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. He stepped to their horse and lifted Tommy down like he weighed no more than a sack of grain. Then he looked up at Claire. For a second, They just stared at each other. Her bruises looked worse in the daylight, purple and blue blooming across her pale skin. Eli's jaw tightened at the sight. He held up his arms. "I'll help you down," he said softly. Claire hesitated. She wasn't used to being touched without flinching. But there was nothing in his eyes that looked like the men she knew. No hunger, no cruelty, just concern. Slowly, she placed her hands on his shoulders and let him lift her. The moment her feet touched the ground, her legs nearly buckled. Pain shot through her side. Eli's hands stayed firm on her arms, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured. "Ribs?" She nodded, biting her lip. "I think so. We'll get you inside," he said. He released her carefully and motioned toward the house. Tommy looked around, eyes wide. "We live here now?" he asked. Eli didn't answer right away. He'd brought them here. He'd promised to protect them. But he hadn't thought beyond the ride, beyond getting them away from Crowley. Now the weight of what he'd done settled heavier on his shoulders. A woman and a child on his land. Under his roof. Under his name, whether the law said so or not. He looked down at Tommy. "For now," Eli said, "we'll figure the rest out." Somehow that was enough for the boy. He grinned, dirt smudging his cheeks. "It's big," Tommy said, turning in a circle. "It's quiet," Claire whispered, more to herself than anyone. Eli led them up the porch steps and pushed open the front door. "Ain't much," he said, "but it's solid. And it's safe." The inside of the house was simple. A main room with a table, a fireplace, a couple of chairs, and shelves lined with a few books and tools. A narrow hall led to 2 small bedrooms. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and coffee and leather. Claire stepped slowly across the threshold, every part of her tense, waiting for some trap, some hidden cost. None came. Tommy rushed past her, dropping his small bundle of belongings on the floor. "Mama, look, there's a stove," he said, running his fingers along the iron door like it was a treasure. "And chairs that ain't broken." Claire managed a tiny smile. "Careful, Tommy." Eli watched them, feeling something shift inside his chest. A pinch he didn't have a name for yet. "You two can take that room," he said, nodding toward the one on the left. "There's a bed. It's old, but the mattress is decent. I'll bring in more blankets." Claire opened her mouth, then closed it again. "Mr. Ward," "Eli," he corrected gently. "If you're gonna be on my land, might as well use my name." She swallowed. "Eli," she said softly, felt strange on her tongue. Too personal and somehow respectful at the same time. We can't just take your room, or your things. We don't have money to pay you." Crowley. He kept everything. Eli's gaze softened. "I didn't bring you here to charge you," he said. "I brought you here so he'd stop putting his hands on you." Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, embarrassed. "I don't want to be a burden." He shook his head. "You're not. A burden's a man who hits a woman so hard she can barely stand. You're a guest." Tommy looked between them. "Mama can work," he said. "She's real good at sewing. And cooking. She can clean. I can work too. I can feed animals and stuff." Eli's lips tugged in the smallest hint of a smile. "I believe you. There's plenty to do around here. We'll figure it out." He pulled a chair out from the table. "Sit," he told Claire. "You look like the wind could knock you over." She hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair with a quiet groan. Pain shot through her ribs again. Eli noticed and went to a small cabinet. He returned with a bottle and a clean cloth. "This is laudanum mixed with a little whiskey," he said. "It'll help with the worst of it. But you only take a little. Too much makes your head fuzzy." He poured a small dose and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed for a second. Claire's breath caught. No one had ever treated her injuries like they mattered before. She took the medicine quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli nodded. "Tommy," he said, turning to the boy. "You hungry?" Tommy nodded quickly. "Always," he said. Eli reached for a pot already hanging near the hearth. "I got stew left from last night. Not fancy, but it'll fill your stomachs." Claire inhaled deeply. The smell of beef and potatoes and onions filled the room as Eli stirred the pot and ladled stew into bowls. Her eyes stung with sudden, unexpected emotion. How many nights had she gone to bed with nothing or almost nothing? How many times had she eaten scraps after Crowley finished? Because she didn't need as much? Eli set a bowl in front of Tommy, then one before Claire. She stared at the small cloud of steam rising from it. "Go on," Eli said quietly. "It's for you." She lifted the spoon with a shaking hand and took a small bite. It was simple, a little salty, warm, real. Tears spilled down her bruised cheeks. She tried to hide them, but Tommy saw. "Mama?" he asked. "You okay?" She nodded quickly, swallowing hard. It's good," she said. Eli looked away, giving her the dignity of not staring while she cried. He pretended to busy himself with his own bowl, though his ears stayed tuned to every small sound she made. After they ate, the laudanum softened the sharp edges of her pain, leaving Claire exhausted and heavy. Her eyelids drooped. Eli noticed, stood, and nodded toward the bedroom. "You should rest," he said. "You've had too much night for one lifetime." "What about you?" she asked, forcing her eyes open. "I got work to do," he said. "Chores don't care if you had a long night. I'll be around." Tommy grabbed her hand. "I'll stay with Mama," he said. "Make sure she's okay." Eli smiled faintly. "That's a good thing to do." He helped Claire stand and led them to the small room. The bed was narrow but clean. He changed the linens just last week, not knowing why he bothered keeping a spare bed ready in a house where no one ever stayed. Now he knew. "Y'all holler if you need anything," he said. "Tommy, if your mama's breathing sounds funny or she can't wake up easy, you come get me, all right?" Tommy nodded seriously. "Yes, sir." Claire paused at the door, turning back to Eli. We don't deserve this," she said softly. He met her gaze. "Everybody deserves to be safe," he replied. "That's where everything else starts." She didn't argue. She was too tired. She lay down on the bed, Tommy curling up beside her, their fingers intertwined. For the first time in a long time, sleep didn't come with the dread of heavy footsteps and slammed doors. It came with the memory of a man standing between her and a raised fist. Eli stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. Alone in the main room, he exhaled a long, slow breath. The house felt different already. Less empty. More alive. It scared him a little. It warmed him a lot. He grabbed his hat and stepped out into the yard. Chores waited. Animals needed feeding. Water troughs needed breaking through the ice. Fences needed checking. As he worked, his mind kept drifting back to the bruises on Claire's face. The way she flinched at sudden sounds. The fierce way Tommy had planted himself in front of her whenever Crowley raised his voice. Eli knew one thing for certain. Crowley wasn't done. Men like that were never done. He forked hay into the trough and muttered under his breath, "Let him try." Late morning, as the sun climbed higher, Eli noticed a cloud of dust on the distant road. He narrowed his eyes, hand instinctively dropping to the gun at his hip. But as the riders came into view, he recognized one of them, the sheriff. A good man mostly, not perfect, but not bought and paid for either. Eli wiped his hands on his jeans and walked to the front yard to meet them. "Mornin', Ward," Sheriff Hayes called as he reined in his horse. "Heard you brought company out here." Eli didn't smile, didn't scowl. News travels fast. The sheriff swung down from his saddle. He looked serious, and there was a weight on his shoulders that hadn't been there the week before. "Jeb Crowley came stormin' into my office this morning," Hayes said. "Swearin' you stole his woman and his boy. Said you assaulted him. Said he's gonna press charges." "He hit her," Eli said flatly. "More than once. I saw the bruises. I heard the fear. He's lucky I didn't do more than shove him into a wall." Hayes sighed. "I don't doubt it, Ward. I've heard whispers about him for months now. But whispers don't hold up in court." "Bruises do," Eli replied. "Scars. Broken ribs. Those hold up just fine." The sheriff looked toward the house. She in there. Resting, Eli said. She's hurt. Hayes shifted his weight. If I ask to talk to her, are you gonna let me? Eli hesitated. He didn't want Claire dragged back into fear. But he knew something else too. The law, at least the honest kind, could only help if the truth was spoken out loud. If she feels up to it, Eli said, you'll be respectful. You know me better than that, Hayes replied. Eli called softly at the bedroom door. Claire? Sheriff Hayes is here. He wants to talk, if you're all right with it. There was a pause. Then the sound of shuffling, a quiet breath, and Claire's voice, thin but steady. Okay. Eli opened the door and stepped aside as the sheriff removed his hat. He looked at Claire lying on the bed, Tommy sitting straight-backed beside her like a little guard. The sheriff's eyes darkened when he saw her injuries. Ma'am, he said gently. Name's Sheriff Hayes. I'm sorry to bother you when you're hurt. Claire studied him carefully, wary. She'd seen lawmen look away before, seen them shrug when women like her begged for help. She didn't owe this man anything. But Eli had let him in. Eli trusted him enough to bring him. That was worth something. You're here because of Jeb, she said quietly. Hayes nodded. He says you belong to him. Says Ward here took you by force. A faint, bitter smile tugged at the corner of her split lip. Belong to him, she repeated, though it sounded more like she was testing the words and finding them rotten. That what he told you? That's what he said, Hayes replied. But I like the truth better than stories. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. You mind if I ask you a few questions? Claire's hand found Tommy's and squeezed. The boy squeezed back. You gonna send us back? Tommy demanded, eyes wide, voice high with fear. No, Hayes said firmly. Not unless your mama asks to go. And somehow I don't see that happening. Claire took a slow, painful breath. Ask, she said. The sheriff nodded. Did Jeb Crowley hit you? She closed her eyes briefly. Yes. How many times? Too many to count, she whispered. Sometimes he was drunk. Sometimes he wasn't. Didn't seem to matter. Did he ever threaten your life? Her fingers trembled in Tommy's. He said if I ever tried to leave, he'd finish what he started. Did you owe him money? Did you agree to go to that boarding house with him? I agreed to clean in exchange for a room, she said. Just a room. For me and my boy. He made it something else. He said he was doing me a favor. Said I should be grateful anyone wanted us. Her voice cracked. Said no one else would. Eli's throat tightened at those words. Hayes scribbled notes, his face growing harder with each sentence. When Eli came for you last night, the sheriff asked, did he force you to leave? No, Claire said quickly. He gave me a choice. He told me it was up to me. I chose to go. Hayes looked at Tommy. Son, is that true? Tommy sat up straighter. Yes, sir, he said. I went and got him. I asked him to take my mama. If he hadn't, Jeb would've. He swallowed, eyes filling. He was gonna LL her. I know it. Hayes closed his notebook slowly. That's enough for now, he said. He turned to Eli. You might be in less trouble than you think, Ward. Eli folded his arms. Crowley ain't gonna let this go. No, the sheriff agreed. He's not. But now I got reason to look into his business. That's more than I had before. He put his hat back on. I'll talk to the boarding house owner. See if she'll back up what Miss Claire said. If she does, we may be able to charge him instead. And if she doesn't? Claire asked quietly. Hayes met her gaze. Then we keep looking, he said. If you're willin', you could file a sworn statement. It won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start. Claire hesitated. Her whole life, every time she'd spoken up, it had made things worse. Men wouldn't believe her. Other women didn't want to get involved. She had learned to stay small and quiet and invisible. But Tommy's hand in hers reminded her of something else. Staying silent hadn't kept her safe either. It had just kept her trapped. I'll sign it, she said, voice shaking. I'll tell the truth. Eli looked at her, a spark of fierce pride lighting in his eyes. Sheriff Hayes nodded. "I'll bring the papers by tomorrow," he said. "In the meantime, you stay put. If Crowley comes out here, you let me know. And if you shoot him, Ward, you make sure it's 'cause you had no other choice." Eli let out a breath that might have been half a laugh. "I don't shoot unless I have to. That's what worries me," Hayes muttered. But there was a hint of respect in his tone. After the sheriff left, the house felt different again. The air wasn't just holding fear now. It held something else too, a possibility. Claire sank back against the pillow, exhausted. Eli stepped into the doorway. "You did good," he said quietly. Telling him the truth. She let out a shaky breath. "It feels like I painted a target on us," she admitted. "Target was already there," Eli answered. "Now you just got someone else who can see it." She looked at him, really looked at him. The strong lines of his face, the quiet concern in his eyes, the way he stood like he'd make himself into a wall if he had to. "Why does it matter so much to you?" she asked. "You don't even know us. You didn't have to get involved." Eli leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "When I was a boy," he said slowly, "there was a man like Crowley in my town. Big, loud. Folks laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. Even when they were mean. He liked to push people around. One day he backed my mama into a corner behind the general store. His eyes darkened with old memory. I was small, couldn't do much, but I stepped between him anyway. He laughed, shoved me down, called me brave for my size. Then he walked off and told everyone he was just teasing. Nobody said a word. Not one. He took a breath. I watched my mama shrink after that, like someone put their boot on her spirit. I promised myself if I ever had the strength to stand in front of someone like that, and if I ever saw a woman looking like my mama did that day, I wouldn't look away. Not again. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Not of fear this time, of understanding, of being seen. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for what happened to her." Eli shrugged slightly, but the motion didn't erase the pain in his eyes. "Can't change the past," he said, "but I can decide what kind of man I'm gonna be now." He nodded toward Tommy, who had fallen asleep half sitting up, his head resting on his mother's arm. "And that boy," Eli continued softly, "he's the bravest kid I've seen. Walkin' into a saloon and askin a stranger for help. He deserves a world where that kind of courage actually means something." Claire brushed a hand through Tommy's hair, her bruised fingers gentle. "You already changed his world," she said. "Maybe mine too." Eli looked away, the words hitting somewhere deep. "Get some rest," he murmured. "I'll be right outside. You need anything, you call." She watched him go, the shape of him filling the doorway before disappearing. As the day wore on, Claire drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she woke, she heard the sounds of ranch life. The rhythmic thunk of an axe splitting wood, the low murmur of Eli talking to his horse, Tommy's high, excited voice somewhere outside asking 1,000 questions. No shouting, no slamming doors, no heavy footsteps coming down the hall with violence on the other side. When evening settled, Eli cooked again. The smell of beans and cornbread filled the house. Tommy burst into the room, cheeks flushed, hair messy, eyes sparkling. "Mama," he said, bouncing at the edge of the bed. "Mr. Eli showed me how to brush a horse, and we gave em hay, and he said I can help feed em tomorrow. There's a horse named Dolly and one named Buck, and Buck tried to nibble my sleeve, but Mr. Eli said he was just playing." Claire couldn't help it. She laughed. It hurt her ribs, but it felt like a piece of sunshine inside her chest. "Slow down, sweetheart," she said. "You're gonna run out of words." Eli leaned against the doorframe again, a faint smile on his lips. "Kid's got energy," he said. "That's for sure." "He does," Claire replied softly. "I'm sorry if he's too much." "He ain't too much," Eli said. "He's a boy. He's supposed to be like that." Tommy puffed up with pride. "He said I'm strong," the boy told his mother. "Said strong's good, long as you don't use it to hurt people." "I won't, Mama. I promise." Claire's throat tightened. "I know you won't," she said. Eli cleared his throat. "Suppose you're hungry," he said. "Food's ready." "I can eat at the table," Claire said, pushing herself up slowly. "I don't want to stay in bed like some broken thing." Eli stepped in quickly. "Careful," he said. "I don't mind bringing it here." She shook her head, stubbornness glinting through the pain. "If I don't start moving, I never will." He watched her stand, saw the way she bit down on her lip to keep from crying out, and felt a surge of respect. Claire Lane was more than bruises, more than fear. There was steel under all that hurt. He offered his arm. She hesitated, then took it. Together they walked slowly to the table, Tommy hopping ahead to grab forks. They sat down, the three of them, around a table that had rarely seen more than one plate at a time. The fire cracked softly in the hearth. Outside, crickets sang. Inside, something that felt dangerously close to peace settled over them. "This is nice," Tommy announced between bites. "Feels like a family." He said it without thinking, without guessing how the word would land. Claire froze for a moment, spoon halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flicked to Eli. His gaze met hers, steady, thoughtful. "Could be," Eli said quietly. "Someday, if it's what y'all want." Claire looked down at her bowl, heart pounding. She didn't know him well enough to picture such a thing. Not really. But she knew his hands had been gentle, his voice had been steady, and his back had been a wall between her and a man who wanted to break her. That was more than any man had ever given her before. And as the night deepened and the three of them sat around that old table, something invisible but strong began to weave itself through the room. Thin threads of trust, respect, and maybe, just maybe, the first quiet hint of love growing slowly in the soil of safety and justice and dignity. Eli didn't say much more that night. Claire didn't push him with questions. Tommy fell asleep in his chair, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. Eli carried the boy gently to the bed, then stepped back into the main room, where Claire lingered at the doorway, watching. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I feel different," she admitted. "Scared, but also less alone." Eli's gaze softened. "You ain't alone anymore, Claire," he said. "Not as long as you're under my roof." She held his eyes a moment longer, then whispered, "Thank you, Eli." He gave a small nod, tipping an invisible hat. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's another day, and we got a lot of livin' to relearn." She returned to the small room, lying down beside her son. For the first time in years, Claire Lane let herself imagine a tomorrow that didn't look exactly like yesterday. Outside, under a sky wide as forever, Eli Ward stood on his porch, watching the horizon, hand resting lightly on the gun at his hip, a quiet promise etched in every line of his broad shoulders. If Jeb Crowley came, he'd be waiting, and if the world tried to crush this fragile peace, it would have to go through him first. The next morning came soft and bright, with sunlight sliding through the thin curtains and laying warm stripes across the wooden floor. Claire woke slowly, the way people do when their body isn't sure if it's allowed to relax yet. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she heard it, Tommy's soft snore beside her, the faint clatter of pots in another room, the low murmur of a man's voice humming some wordless tune as he moved about the house. No slamming doors, no harsh curses, no heavy footsteps stumbling in with the weight of whiskey and rage. Just simple, ordinary sounds. They felt almost holy. She turned her head, wincing as the bruises pulled, and saw Tommy sprawled half sideways on the bed. One arm stretched out like he'd fallen asleep, trying to keep a hold of the little bit of safety he'd found. Her heart tightened around him. She brushed his hair back gently. "Tommy," she whispered. "Baby, time to wake up." He made a little noise and rolled toward her, blinking. Then his eyes flew open. "Mama," he breathed, sitting up fast. "We're still here." He said it like he expected to wake up back in that boarding house, like this ranch was a dream that could vanish at any second. "We're still here," she repeated softly. "And it's morning, a real morning." He smiled slowly, and for a moment she saw a glimpse of the carefree boy he might have been if life had been kinder. "Do you think Mr. Eli will let me feed the horses again?" he asked. "Maybe," she answered. If you ask polite. Tommy grinned and scrambled off the bed, bare feet hitting the cool floor. I'm gonna go see, he whispered loudly, already halfway to the door. Wait, Claire called. He stopped, hand on the knob. Don't be underfoot, she said gently. He has chores to do. Offer to help. Don't just pester him. Tommy nodded seriously. Yes, ma'am. He slipped out, the door creaking softly behind him. Claire sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her ribs. They still hurt like fire, but the sharpest edge was gone, dulled by rest and the medicine Eli had given her. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, taking a moment to breathe through the pain. No one was rushing her. No one was yelling for her to hurry or accusing her of laziness. She moved at her own pace, and it felt like learning to walk all over again. In the main room, Eli stood by the stove, coffee steaming in a tin pot, eggs frying in a pan. He looked up at the sound of small footsteps. Mornin', he said. Tommy burst out of the bedroom, hair wild, eyes bright. Mornin', sir, he replied. Can I help? Eli's lips tugged up at one corner. You eat first or you'll fall over, he said. Then we'll see what trouble I can put you to. Tommy grinned and slid into a chair. A moment later, Claire appeared in the doorway, one hand braced against the wall. Eli's attention shifted straight to her. In the light of morning, her bruises looked angrier, the colors deeper, but her eyes were clearer. You should have stayed in bed, he said, though his tone was more worry than scold. I've spent enough days in bed, she replied quietly. Feels like if I lie down any longer, I'll melt into the mattress and never stand again. He studied her for a second, then nodded once. Fair enough. He poured coffee into a mug and slid it toward her. Careful, he said. It's strong enough to stand on its own. She managed a small smile and took it, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. The scent alone made her feel more awake, more present. Thank you, she murmured. He set plates of eggs and leftover cornbread in front of them. As they ate, Tommy talked nonstop about the horses, the windmill, the idea of having a yard that belonged to nobody else. Claire let his voice wash over her like music, listening to the way he sounded more like a child and less like someone always bracing for the next blow. What will you do today? She asked Eli quietly when Tommy paused to shove food into his mouth. Feed the stock. Check the south fence, he said. Got some boards coming loose. After that, haul water, look at the roof on the barn. Storm last month loosened a few shingles. That's a lot for one person, Claire said. Always has been, he replied. But I manage. I can help, she offered. Not with fences or roofs, but inside. Washing, cooking, mending. I don't want to just sit here and wait for things to happen to me anymore. Eli studied her earnest face. She was still pale, every movement careful. But there was something in her eyes now, less fear, more fight. You can start with not lifting anything heavy, he said. Doc would yell at me if he saw you trying to scrub floors in that state. She raised an eyebrow. You planning to tell the doctor I'm here? Eventually, he said. He's the only one knows how to set ribs right. She grimaced. I thought they'd just heal. They will, he answered. Crooked if we don't take care. We'll ride into town in a couple days when you can stand longer. For now, you rest when your body tells you to. If you insist on doing something, you can peel potatoes. I got no objection to that. She almost laughed. Potatoes I can handle. Good, he said. Then we got a deal. After breakfast, Tommy ran outside with Eli to see the animals. Claire washed the dishes slowly, careful not to twist too much. She looked out the small window above the basin. Out there, Eli walked with a long, easy stride, showing Tommy how to hold out his hand flat when feeding the horses so they wouldn't nip his fingers. The way he moved with the animals, patient, steady, unhurried, told her something about the kind of man he was. Gentle with creatures that spooked easy, firm when needed, quiet strength. She pressed her fingers lightly to her bruised cheek and felt a strange, unsteady warmth blooming in her chest. Not infatuation, not some foolish crush. Just a kind of deep, aching appreciation. For the first time in years, a man had seen her pain and used his power to stop it instead of add to it. Later that morning, as Eli worked in the yard, a rider appeared on the dusty road. Eli's hand dropped to his hip out of habit, then relaxed when he recognized the sheriff. Hayes reined in, nodded, and dismounted. "Ward," he said. "Ma'am." "Tommy." Claire came to stand in the doorway with Tommy at her side. "Sheriff," she replied, wary but not as frightened as the day before. Hayes held up a small bundle of papers. "Brought what I promised," he said. "Statement form, complaint, and something else." Eli gestured him inside. Hayes took off his hat at the door, the way decent men did. He set the papers on the table. "I talked to Mrs. Harper," he said. "Boarding house owner. She's scared of Crowley, like you said. But she saw enough she couldn't sleep right at night anymore. She agreed to talk." Relief flickered across Claire's face. She did. Hayes nodded. "Said she heard you crying, saw Bruises, watched him wave money around and act like he owned the place. Didn't step in," he added, a hint of disappointment in his tone. "But sometimes, the best we get from folks is them finally tellin' the truth after the fact." "It's better than nothing," Claire said softly. "That's what I figured," Hayes replied. "So here's the deal. If you're still willing, we get your statement in writing. With the boarding house owner's testimony, we might have enough to bring Crowley in for questioning and maybe more. It's not perfect, but it's a path." Claire looked at the pages like they were both a lifeline and a knife. "If I sign," she asked, "what happens to us?" "Officially," Hayes said, "you're a witness. You're under threat from a man we're looking to charge. I can write up a recommendation you stay out here, safer than town. Unofficially, you already got the best protection in the county stand-in right there." He jerked his chin toward Eli. Eli didn't smile, but one corner of his mouth twitched. Claire took a breath. Her hands shook as she reached for the pen Hayes offered. "I'm tired," she said quietly. "Tired of being scared. Tired of feeling like my life belongs to someone else." She looked up at Eli. "You said everybody deserves to be safe." "I meant it," he replied. She nodded, then bent her head and began to write as Hayes guided her through the words. It hurt to hold the pen, her fingers stiff, but she kept going. She wrote about the first slap, the first shove, the first time he grabbed her so hard her skin bloomed purple. She wrote about the way he smiled afterward, called it a lesson, told her no one would care what he did to her. She wrote about Tommy hiding in corners, about silent tears, about nights spent staring at the ceiling, praying for a way out. Her tears fell onto the page, smearing some of the ink, but she kept going. When she was done, her hand ached and her heart felt raw and exposed, but also lighter, like she'd laid down a piece of the weight she'd been carrying alone. Hayes took the papers gently. "You did a hard thing," he said. "That takes more courage than most men I lock up." She sniffed and tried to smile. "People don't usually call me brave." "Then they ain't been paying attention," Eli muttered. Tommy nodded fiercely. "She's the bravest mama," he declared. "She kept me safe even when she was scared." Hayes' eyes softened. "That right?" he said. "Then maybe it's about time the world started keeping her safe, too." He folded the papers, slipped them into his satchel. "I'll head back to town," he said. "We'll start the process. It'll take time. Crowley'll kick and holler. But things are moving now." Eli walked him out to the yard. "You think he'll come here?" Eli asked quietly. "If he's got half the temper you say he does, I'd bet my badge on it," Hayes replied. "Might be he comes alone. Might be he brings trouble. You just remember what I told you. Don't shoot unless you have to." "I remember," Eli said. "But if it's his life or theirs—" "I know," Hayes said. "I ain't a skin you to stand there and die for the sake of paperwork." He swung into his saddle. "I'll check back in a day or two. In the meantime, keep your eyes open." "Always do," Eli replied. When the sheriff rode off, a quiet settled over the ranch again. Claire watched from the doorway, Tommy at her side. Eli returned, dust trailing his boots. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we live," he said simply. "We don't sit around waitin' on him. We do what needs doin'. You rest. Tommy learns to work a ranch proper. I fix fences. Life keeps moving." "Is it really that simple?" she asked, half skeptical, half hopeful. "Nothing's simple," he admitted. "But we can choose not to let fear be the only thing in the room." That afternoon, Tommy helped Eli haul water and toss hay. Eli showed him how to hold a hammer, how to check for loose nails. Tommy's questions never stopped. "Did you grow up out here? How many cows do you have? Did you ever see an outlaw? Are there wolves? How old are you? Did you have a mama? Where's your hat from?" Eli answered the ones he could, avoided the ones that cut too close, and let the boys' chatter fill up spaces that had been quiet too long. Inside, Claire sat at the table with a small box Eli had brought in from a shelf in the bedroom. "I never used this," he'd said, setting it in front of her. "But the woman who owned this house before me did. Figured you might put it to better use than dust." Inside the box were a few sewing needles, thread, and scraps of fabric. Claire's fingers trembled as she touched them. Memories drifted up. Her own mother's hands teaching her to mend torn shirts when she was little, the soft rhythm of needle and thread passing in and out. Back when life had still had small, quiet moments. She pulled one of Tommy's worn shirts from their bundle and began mending a tear at the shoulder. Each stitch felt like claiming a tiny piece of herself back. When Eli and Tommy came in for supper, the shirt lay finished on the table. "Looks good," Eli said, picking it up, admiring the neat, careful stitches. "You did that today?" Claire nodded, a little shy. "I can help keep clothes from falling apart," she said. "It's not much. It's more than you think," he replied. "Out here, little things add up." Tommy grabbed the shirt. "Mama's the best sewer," he announced proudly. "She fixed my pants when they ripped, remember?" Claire smiled at her son, warmth filling the spaces fear used to occupy. That night, after dinner and another round of Tommy's excited storytelling, Claire stepped out onto the porch while Eli tucked the boy in. The sky above stretched wide and deep, filled with stars like someone had flung diamonds across black velvet. The air was cool, biting her lungs in a way that made her feel awake and alive. She folded her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the strange vulnerability of standing still with nothing chasing her. She heard the door open softly behind her. Eli stepped out, the boards creaking under his weight. He stood beside her without touching, his presence solid and steady. "Too cold?" he asked. "I can get you a shawl." "I'm all right," she said. "The air feels clean." He looked out at the land. "That's why I stay out here," he said. "Town's noisy. People lie to themselves a lot. Out here, the land don't pretend to be anything it's not. Makes it easier to breathe." She watched his profile in the starlight, the strong line of his jaw, the calm set of his mouth. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed quietly. "Do what?" "Be somewhere safe and not be waiting for it to be taken away," she said. "I keep expecting to wake up back there, or to see him come through the door." Eli breathed slowly, then nodded. "Makes sense," he said. "You've been hurt a long time. Your mind's still catching up to your body." "How long does that take?" she whispered. "As long as it takes," he replied. "There ain't no right number of days. But it helps to have something to hold onto that ain't fear." "Like what?" "Like work you're proud of," he said. "A kid's laugh. A hot meal you know you earned. Land you can see for miles. People who treat you like you matter. Those kinds of things." She swallowed, eyes burning. "I don't know if I matter," she admitted. "Not really. Men like Jeb always make sure you know you don't." Eli turned his head to look at her. His voice came out low and firm. "You matter to Tommy," he said. "He'd walk through fire for you. That boy's eyes light up every time you smile, even if it hurts you to do it. And you matter to me." Her breath caught. "Why?" He looked back at the land, giving her the respect of not trapping her under his gaze. "Because you're here," he said. "Because you're human. Because you've survived more than most and you're still standing." That counts for something in my book. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. This time she didn't feel ashamed of them. I'm trying, she whispered. I know, he replied. That's enough for tonight. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, the crickets, the faint lowing of cattle in the distance, the wind moving through dry grass. For once, the silence didn't feel heavy. Felt like a blanket. Inside the house, Tommy shifted in his sleep, mumbling something about horses and pancakes. Claire turned toward the sound, a soft smile touching her lips. He likes you, she said. Eli shrugged lightly. He's a good kid. Makes it easy. He hasn't had many men be kind to him, she said. He's trying to soak up every bit of it. Eli's hand brushed the edge of the porch rail. I ain't looking to replace nobody, he said quietly. But while he's under my roof, I'll do right by him. By both of you. She believed him. She didn't know why she believed him so easily, when believing had brought her pain before. But she did. Maybe it was the way he didn't rush her. The way he stood close without crowding. The way he never once made her feel like she owed him for what he'd done. Eli? She said. Yeah. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered. Not just my bruises. He swallowed, his throat working. Those bruises, he said. They'll fade. But the person who walked through that's what I see. Her heart twisted, in a way that hurt and healed all at once. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. You don't gotta know, he said. We'll take it one day at a time. Tomorrow we get up, feed the animals, cook breakfast, argue about potatoes. Same as today. Little by little, life will start to feel like life again instead of survival. She nodded slowly, letting his words sink into places inside her that had been empty. One day at a time, she repeated. I think I can try that. That's all I ask, he said. She went back inside to check on Tommy, her steps a little steadier than the day before. Eli stayed on the porch a while longer, eyes on the horizon. Somewhere out there, he knew Jeb Crowley was stewing, furious, dangerous. Trouble would come. It always did. But for the first time in years, Eli didn't feel like he was just living for himself. There were two people sleeping under his roof who needed him to hold his ground. And he'd made a promise, maybe not in words, but in every step he'd taken since Tommy walked into that saloon. If the world tried to hurt them again, it would find Eli Ward standing in its way. As the stars wheeled slowly overhead, he whispered into the quiet night a simple vow that belonged to no one but him. You're safe here, he said, even though Claire and Tommy were too far away to hear it. I'll make sure of it. And somewhere, deep in the center of the small house, a tired woman and a brave little boy slept a little easier, held by the invisible strength of that promise. The next few days slipped by in a quiet rhythm that felt strange and new to Claire, like wearing someone else's coat until it slowly began to fit her. Each morning started the same way. Sunlight slowly warming the room, the soft weight of Tommy curled beside her, and the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. The first morning, she woke with fear tight in her chest, expecting to hear Jeb's voice or the sound of boots stomping down the hallway. Instead, she heard Eli moving calmly around the house, the smooth scrape of a chair, the steady clink of dishes, the low, comforting rumble of a man humming under his breath. The second morning, the fear was still there, but weaker. By the third, it was a bruise instead of a knife. On the fourth morning, when she opened her eyes and saw Tommy's hair sticking up in wild directions and sunlight drawing a soft line across his cheek, she felt something else sneak in. The tiniest hint of hope that maybe this new life wasn't a trick that would be snatched away. She eased herself up, sucking in a breath when her ribs protested. The healing was slow, stubborn, but each day she noticed she could stand a little straighter, move a little easier. When she stepped out into the main room, she saw Eli at the table with a pencil and a scrap of paper, head bent, lips pressed in concentration. Tommy sat across from him, swinging his legs as he chewed on a piece of biscuit. What are you doing? Claire asked softly. Eli glanced up, almost sheepish for a second. Making a list, he said, of what needs doing before winter really sets in. Tommy grinned. He's teaching me how to write my name, too, he added proudly. Look, he held up the paper. Across the top, in big, crooked letters, were the words Tommy L. Eli had drawn faint lines for him to trace. Some letters leaned too far left, some too far right, but they were his. Claire's heart swelled at the sight. That's wonderful, she said, ruffling her son's hair. You're learning fast. I didn't get to go to school much, Tommy said. Jeb said I was better off working. But Mr. Eli says knowing your letters is a kind of strength. Eli shrugged, a little embarrassed. Reading lets you see what folks are really saying when they write things down, he said. Makes it harder for anyone to trick you. Thought it might be worth teaching. Claire looked at him with something like awe. Protecting her with fists and courage was one thing. Protecting her boy's future with education was another. Can you teach me too? She asked quietly. I know some letters, but not all. I always wanted to learn more. He met her gaze and nodded. Course, he said. We'll do it in the evenings. After supper, when chores are done. I got a few books, might not bore you to death. She smiled, really smiled this time. I doubt that. The days settled into a pattern. Eli rose before dawn to tend the animals. Tommy, eager and determined, followed him as often as Claire would allow, learning how to carry buckets, open gates, and move around large animals without spooking them. Eli watched the boy careful, never letting him get too close to a kicking hoof or tangled in a rope, but giving him real jobs too, jobs that made Tommy stand a little taller. Claire cleaned what she could, cooked when her ribs allowed for standing, and sat at the table sewing when she had to rest. She fixed torn shirts, patched worn knees on Eli's work pants, even stitched a small little horse shape into the corner of Tommy's pocket, just to see him light up with joy. Some afternoons, when the pain was too much, she lay on the bed and listened to the sounds of the ranch. It soothed her, the steady rhythm of it all. Life here had a heartbeat. The creak of the windmill, the lowing of cattle, the murmur of Eli's voice teaching Tommy something about fences or feed. But under that calm rhythm, tension simmered like a pot just off the boil. Sheriff Hayes hadn't come back yet, but Claire knew things were moving in town. Papers filed, questions asked. Jeb Crowley stewing and spitting, pacing like a caged animal with a bruised pride. One afternoon, as the sun tilted west and painted the fields in warm orange, Eli came in from the yard, hat in hand. His shirt stuck to his shoulders with sweat, and dust lined the creases at his neck. Fence is patched, he said, wiping his brow. Cows won't be going anywhere they shouldn't for now. Claire looked up from the potatoes she was peeling at the table. She'd been watching his silhouette move across the land through the window, a strong, steady shape that made her feel less like the world was about to collapse. You work too hard, she said. You don't have to fix everything in one day. That fence isn't just wood and wire now, he replied. It's a line between you and trouble. That sent a little shiver down her spine. Not from fear. From the way his protectiveness reached out beyond the house itself, wrapping around the land. Tommy? He called. The boy popped up from behind the far end of the table where he'd been inspecting a small wooden horse Eli had carved for him. Yeah. There's something I want to show you, Eli said. Outside. Tommy jumped to his feet. Can Mama come too? If she feels up to it, Eli said, glancing at her. Claire hesitated, hand on her ribs. The idea of walking too far made her wince. But the last thing she wanted was to be left behind, stuck inside while her son built memories without her. I can manage, she said. Just don't make me run. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Wouldn't dream of it. He walked them out to the far edge of the yard where the land sloped gently down to a small creek lined with low shrubs. The water glittered under the fading light. This is yours, Eli said quietly when they reached the edge. Claire frowned, confused. What do you mean? This line right here, he said, pointing at a stake driven into the ground. From that stone there to that cottonwood tree and all the way past the barn on the other side. While you're here, this is your ground. No one steps onto it with bad intentions and walks away without regret. Tommy's eyes widened. You mean, like a fort? Sort of, Eli replied. Except this one's not imaginary. It's real. And I'm the one guarding it. Claire swallowed, throat tight. You act like you've known us forever, she said softly. I don't understand it. Eli looked down at the creek, his jaw working. I don't have to know every detail of your past to know you don't deserve what happened to you, he said. Sometimes a man just knows when something is right. He lifted his gaze to hers. Something open and raw there. You being here feels right. The wind picked up, tugging at her hair. Part of her wanted to step back, afraid of the closeness rising between them. Another part wanted to step forward, to lay her hand on his arm and tell him she felt it too. That strange, settling peace she hadn't known she needed until she found it inside these fences. Before she could answer, Tommy pointed toward the horizon. Ryder, he said, voice suddenly small. Eli's entire body shifted in an instant. He stepped slightly in front of Claire and Tommy, his eyes narrowing as he followed the dust trail moving toward the ranch. Only one rider. Fast. Eli's hand dropped to his gun. Claire's heart surged into her throat. For a moment, every bruise seemed to throb with the memory of Jeb's voice, his boots, his fists. She grabbed Tommy's shoulders instinctively, pulling him close to her side. Stay behind me, Eli murmured. They watched as the rider drew nearer, the horse dark against the light. As he got close enough, Claire saw the badge glint on his chest. Sheriff Hayes. Eli relaxed, just a little, his hand loosening on the pistol. Hayes pulled up in a spray of dirt, breath puffing in the cool air as his horse snorted. His expression was serious, lines carved deeper into his face than before. Ward, he said, tipping his hat. Ma'am. Tommy. Sheriff, Eli replied. You look like a man with news. Hayes nodded, sliding off his saddle. We need to talk, he said. Inside. That one word, inside, carried weight. Eli led the way back to the house, Claire and Tommy trailing close behind. Inside, the light felt dimmer even though the sun wasn't fully down yet. Eli gestured for Hayes to sit at the table. The sheriff didn't. He stayed standing, hat turning slowly in his hands. All right, Eli said. Tell me. Hayes took a breath. We brought Crowley in this morning, he said. Claire felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to stay upright. Tommy's fingers squeezed around hers. We confronted him with Mrs. Harper's testimony, with Miss Claire's statement. Man cursed up a storm, threatened to sue everyone from me to the judge. But the judge granted a preliminary order. He's to stay away from you, Claire. Away from this ranch. That's the good news. There's bad news too, Eli said quietly. Hayes nodded. Judge says we need more to apply a full charge that'll stick. Crowley's got money, remember? Bought himself a fancy lawyer from the city. They're claiming Claire's lying, Mrs. Harper's confused. And you, Ward, only got involved because you wanted another man's woman. A hot flush rose to Claire's cheeks. Shame and anger twisted inside her. I know, Hayes cut in gently. I know that's not how it is. But lies don't care about truth. They care about power. He rubbed a hand over his face. Crowley paid bail. He's out. And he's mad. The room seemed to tilt. Claire's heart hammered. So he can come here? She whispered. Can he just ride right up? Not legally, Hayes said. But men like him ain't big believers in rules. That's why I came. To warn you. Eli's eyes had gone flat and cold, like stones in a river. How mad? He asked. Mad enough to do something stupid? Mad enough to try, Hayes replied. I don't think he'll come in broad daylight with witnesses around. But I'd bet money he'll try something at night. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. But sooner than you'd like. Claire's breaths came faster, her ribs protesting. I knew it, she whispered. I knew we weren't safe. I knew this was too good. Eli turned to her, eyes sharp. Stop, he said softly but firmly. You are safer here than you were there. That don't mean danger disappears. But it means you ain't alone in front of it anymore. Hayes nodded. He's right, ma'am. You got someone ready to stand between you and him now. And you got me in town working the angles I can. What are we supposed to do? Claire asked, feeling like the walls of the small house were closing in. Just wait for him to show up? Eli shook his head. We do what we've been doing. Live, work, rest. But we stay ready. He looked at Hayes. You gonna be able to back me if this turns ugly? Hayes met his eyes. If he comes out here with a weapon and you have to defend your home, I'll stand by you, he said. I'd rather have his blood on his own conscience than yours, but I know sometimes men like him don't give you that choice. Tommy slipped closer to Eli, his small hand brushing the cowboy's sleeve. He's not gonna take my mama again, Tommy said, his jaw set in a way that belonged on a much older face. Right? Eli looked down at him. Not while I'm breathing, he said. Hayes stayed for supper, though no one ate much. The tension lay over the table like a thick blanket. After Hayes rode back to town, dusk deepened into night. Eli went through the house shutting and checking every window and door. He added an extra wooden bar across the front, one he kept for storms but now used to keep out something worse than wind. Claire watched him work, her chest a battlefield between old panic and new trust. When he finished, he turned to her. Tonight, you and Tommy sleep in my room, he said. Door locks better. Windows smaller. I'll take the chair in the main room. I can't do that, she protested. It's your space. It's wood and blankets, he said. You hear something in the night, you'll feel boxed in where you are now. My room sits closer to the back, harder for someone to reach. I want you where it makes the most sense for you to be. Not where pride says I should be. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. He was right. He usually was. All right, she said softly. Thank you. Later, after Tommy fell asleep clinging to her hand in Eli's bed, Claire lay staring at the low ceiling. She could hear Eli moving in the next room, the soft creak of the chair as he settled into it, the faint click of metal as he checked his gun. The night felt too quiet. Every little sound, the wind brushing the side of the house, an animal shifting in the barn, made her jump. Finally, she slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Tommy, and padded barefoot down the short hallway. Eli sat in the straight-back chair near the door, hat off, gun laid across his thigh, boots planted solidly on the floor. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, but alert, watching, waiting, guarding. Claire leaned against the wall, arms folded loosely. You're not going to sleep at all, are you? She asked softly. He glanced at her, then back at the door. Maybe a little, he said, but not enough to miss anything that matters. She stepped closer. You can't stay awake every night. Not for us. Watch me, he said simply. The words landed heavy and warm in the center of her chest. Eli, she whispered, I don't want you to destroy yourself to save me. I ain't destroying myself, he said. This is just what it looks like when you finally got something worth losing. Her breath caught. She stared at him, at the line of his shoulders, the way his big hands settled steady on his gun. You hardly know me, she said. He huffed a slow breath. I know enough, he replied. I know the way Tommy looks at you, like you hung the moon. I know you walked through hell and still managed to keep that boy fed and loved and alive. I know you didn't lie when you signed that statement. I know you're brave enough to stay when running would be easier. I know enough to decide you're worth standing up for. Tears blurred her vision. No one has ever said anything like that about me, she whispered. They should have, he replied. Long time ago. She wanted to argue, to tell him about every mistake she'd made. Every time she'd stayed with the wrong man because she thought she didn't deserve better. But looking at him now, she didn't want to drag those old ghosts between them. Not tonight. Not when he was giving so much of himself to keep their new life from being stolen. If he comes, she started. When, Eli said. Not if. Men like Crowley don't know when to quit. She swallowed. When he comes, she whispered. I don't want you to let him turn you into him. Don't lose yourself trying to fight him. For a moment, something raw flashed in Eli's eyes. You think I'm like him? No, she said quickly. Never. You're the opposite. That's what scares me. He took a quiet breath. I've had to draw my gun before, Claire. This wouldn't be my first time. It's not something I like. But I know how to do it clean. I know how to aim at the danger, not everything around it. What if he says things? She asked, voice almost a whisper. About me. About my past. He probably will, Eli said. Bullies like him use words same way they use fists. But I ain't gonna believe him. You shouldn't either. What if he tells you I'm not worth all this trouble? Eli met her gaze in the dim light. Then I'll know he's scared, he said. Because only scared men talk down about women who finally got free. She wiped at her eyes, laughing softly even as tears fell. You talk like you've thought about this a lot. I have, he admitted. All day. Every hour. You must regret helping us, she said quietly. No, he said immediately, no hesitation. Not once. I regret not doing something sooner. For other women I knew were hurtin'. For my mama. But you? I'd do it again tomorrow, even if it meant starting from scratch. The chair creaked as he shifted. You should get some rest, he said gently. If he comes, you'll need your strength. And if he doesn't, you'll want enough sleep to make tomorrow feel like more than just survival. She stepped closer, standing almost beside his chair now. If you hear him, promise you'll call me? She asked. I don't want to wake up to it already done. I want to stand behind you. I want him to see I'm not alone. Eli's jaw worked. That's a dangerous thing to ask. I know, she said, but I'm tired of hiding. I want him to see with his own eyes that I chose this. Chose to leave. Chose you. Chose safety. That last word hung between them like a fragile lantern. Chose you. Eli's fingers flexed once on the gun. All right, he said softly. If he comes, and there's time, I'll call your name. She nodded. Then I'll go back to bed. She started down the hallway, then paused and looked back. Eli? Yeah. Whatever happens, she said quietly. Thank you for giving me a place to stand. He swallowed hard. You don't owe me thanks, he replied. Just don't give up on yourself again. That's all I ask. She nodded, then disappeared into the dark hallway. Eli waited, listening to the soft creak of the mattress, the rustle of blankets, the steady return of quiet. Outside, the night stretched long and still. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Eli's eyes grew heavy but never fully closed. He listened to everything, the wind, the groan of the house settling, the night animals. And then, somewhere past midnight, he heard it. A distant, low rumble. Hoofbeats. Not a herd. Not a stray. A single horse moving fast, heading straight for the ranch. Eli stood up slowly, every movement silent. He checked the door bar, then walked softly down the hall. He opened the door to his room a crack. Claire, he whispered. She stirred, sat up, rubbing her eyes. Tommy snored on beside her. What is it? She asked, voice thick with sleep. He's coming, Eli said quietly. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. No matter what you hear, you don't open it unless it's my voice and my voice only. Her heart raced. Fear crashed over her like a wave, but under it, something else. Anger, tired and sharp. You promised, she whispered, to call me if there was time. Eli held her gaze. Then he nodded once. It's time, he said. But you stay behind me. You don't move in front. Not for any reason. She nodded, swallowing hard. Tommy? She whispered, brushing her son's hair. He blinked awake, confused. Mama, stay in this room, she said gently. No matter what you hear, understand. His eyes widened. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. I mean it, Tommy, Eli added, his voice carrying a gravity that made the boy sit up straighter. You're brave. That don't mean you jump in front when bullets might fly. You protect your mama by doing what she asks. Yes, sir, Tommy whispered, voice shaking. Claire forced a smile for her boy, then slid off the bed. Her knees wobbled, but she held herself upright. Eli stepped aside to let her pass, then reached back and pressed her hand once. just once, strong and steady. "Behind me," he reminded. "Always," she said. Together, they walked down the hallway toward the main room. Outside, the hoofbeats slowed. Gravel crunched. A horse snorted. Then, a heavy boot hit the ground. Another. A shadow moved across the front window. Fear flooded Claire's veins, cold and hot all at once. But this time, when she stood behind Eli, she did not shrink. She was terrified, but she was done being small. Eli moved to the door, lifting the bar with practiced ease, every motion quiet, controlled. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he called out, voice calm and firm. "That's far enough." A harsh, drunken laugh sounded from the other side. "You gonna invite a man in?" Jeb Crowley's voice slurred through the wood. Claire's skin crawled, but she stayed put, fingers digging into the back of Eli's shirt. Eli didn't bother to sound friendly. "Not tonight," he said. "State your business from there." Crowley spat onto the porch. "You know what my business is. You stole my woman and my boy. You think you can hide him out here and play house?" Eli's jaw tightened. "They're not yours," he said. "Not your property. Not your anything. They're under my protection now." One heartbeat. Two. The night seemed to hold its breath. "Open this door, Ward," Crowley growled. "Ain't decent to talk through with like cowards." Eli glanced back at Claire, then turned to face the door again. He lifted the latch and opened it just wide enough to step through, pulling it mostly closed behind him, leaving only a sliver of space where Claire could see the outline of his shoulders. She gripped the edge, heart pounding, watching as Eli stepped onto the porch. Jeb Crowley stood there, swaying slightly in the moonlight. His face was red, anger and whiskey twisting his features. His hand hovered near the gun at his hip. "Where is she?" Crowley demanded. "Where's my woman?" "She ain't yours," Eli said again. "And she's not comin' out here for you." Crowley sneered. "You think she chose you? Some lonely rancher with more cows than friends? She came with me. I fed her, gave her a place. She owes me." She'd slide her arm through his and simply stand there, anchoring him like he'd once anchored her. "You're not alone anymore," she'd remind him softly. "Not unless you ask to be." And sometimes, when Tommy was out in the pasture trying to teach a calf to follow him like a pup, they would sit on the porch steps and just be. No big speeches. No heavy conversations. Just the soft murmur of wind in the grass, the creak of the house, the distant sound of Tommy's laughter. In those quiet pockets of ordinary time, the true measure of their new life showed itself. Word about them spread in the way stories always do in small towns. Some people still talked behind their hands, muttering about that woman and that boy, and the big fool who brought trouble home. But others had softer things to say. A widow down the road started sending along extra quilts for the boy. A shopkeeper began keeping a few more affordable items in stock after watching Claire carefully count pennies one too many times. Miss Lila at the bakery kept a small jar by the till, labeled for the ones starting over, dropping in coins here and there. One day, Claire saw a woman with bruised wrists lingering too long by that jar, eyes shining with unshed tears. Later, she watched as the same woman boarded a wagon headed out of town, a small bag in her hands and a determined set to her jaw. "Think she'll be all right?" Claire asked Eli, watching the wagon disappear into the distance. Eli glanced at her, then at Tommy playing in the yard, then back at the road. "I think she heard about somebody else who walked away and lived," he said. "Sometimes that's enough to start." Claire tucked that thought away like a treasure. Her story, once something that had almost destroyed her, had quietly become a lantern someone else could see by in the dark. Not because she was perfect, not because the law had done everything right, but because she'd spoken and because enough people had listened. One evening, many seasons later, when Tommy was taller than both of them and already talking about maybe taking a few head of cattle and carving out his own section of land nearby, Claire and Eli sat on the porch again. The setting sun painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, the same colors she remembered from the night she'd decided to go to the hearing. Her hair had more silver in it now. Eli's lines were deeper, but the way they leaned into each other, the way their hands found each other without thinking, that hadn't changed. "Remember the day your life changed?" Eli asked softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Claire smiled. "Which one?" she asked. "I seem to have collected a few of those." "The one where you walked into a crowded room," he said, bruised, scared, sure no one would believe you, and still told the truth anyway. She thought about it, about how her voice had shaken, her hands had trembled, her heart had pounded so hard she'd been sure people could see it through her dress. "I remember thinking I might fall apart," she said. "I remember thinking if they didn't believe me, I'd never try to speak again." "They did believe you," he reminded her. "Maybe not all of them at first. Maybe not enough to fix everything. But enough. And when I came out," she added softly, "you were the first face I saw. I think that mattered most. The judge, the sheriff, the crowd, that was law and community. You were home." Eli was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with feeling. "Funny thing is," he said, "that little boy asking me to please take his mama. It changed my life just as much as it did yours. I thought I was stepping in to save someone. Turns out, I was the one being pulled out of something I didn't even know was drowning me." "Loneliness?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Loneliness. The kind that gets so normal you forget it's there until suddenly it's gone and the world looks different." Claire laced her fingers with his. "We saved each other then," she said. "Not in one big moment. In 100 small ones. More like 1,000, he corrected with a faint smile. "And we're not done." They sat there until the sun slipped below the horizon and the first stars pricked through the deepening blue. Somewhere beyond their land, men like Jeb Crowley still existed. Women were still being hurt. Boys and girls were still learning too early what fear tasted like. Claire knew that. She didn't pretend the world had turned gentle just because her corner of it had grown kinder. But she also knew that somewhere, in some town she'd never see, another woman might be standing before a judge, telling her story with shaking hands because she'd heard that it was possible. Another child might be looking up at a stranger, voice shaking but hopeful, asking, "Sir, please help my mama," because he'd heard that sometimes, just sometimes, the right person will nod. "Do you ever wish it had all been easier?" Eli asked quietly, watching the first fireflies blink in the yard. "Sometimes," she admitted. "When I think about the girl I was, the one who didn't know she was allowed to want more. I wish she'd known sooner. I wish she'd had someone to run to earlier." She paused, feeling the soft weight of his hand in hers. "But then I think, if it had all been easy, I might not understand as deeply as I do now what dignity really means, what it costs, how fierce it is to claim it." He turned to look at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You're the bravest person I know," he said. She shook her head. "No," she replied gently. "I'm just someone who ran when it was time to run, spoke when it was time to speak, and grabbed hold of the hand offered to me when it showed up on a quiet night in a loud room." She smiled at him. "You're the one who nodded, Eli. When a scared little boy asked you to do something that changed everything, you said yes." His gaze softened. "Best yes I ever gave," he said. The wind moved through the grass, carrying with it the sense of earth and cattle and wildflowers. The house behind them, once a quiet refuge for one man, now held the echoes of laughter, the scuff marks of growing feet, the quiet hum of a family that had chosen itself. It wasn't the story most people wrote for a woman like Claire. It wasn't the story men like Jeb Crowley expected when they first reached out a hand claiming to offer help. It was messier, harder, slower. It took more courage than anyone had ever told her she had. But it was hers. Fully, finally, irrevocably hers.